So, hello everybody. We will wait a few more seconds for people to join and then we will start. Okay. People are still joining, so give them a few more seconds. All right, then it's time to start. I want to welcome everybody to our today's webinar together with our partner Delinea, in which we will talk about the rise of cyber insurances. My name is Manuela Olhäuser, Marketing Manager at IC Consult. Our presenters today are Scott Shields, Senior Sales Engineer at Delinea, and Paul Previtt, Senior IAM Consultant at IC Consult. And yeah, before we start with the presentation and discussion, just some quick housekeeping notes from my side. You will all be on mute during the webinar, so if you have a question, just please type in your question in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And we will also record the session, so you will all receive an email with a link to this recording within the next few days. And yeah, that's it already from my side. Then I hand over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Manuela. Hi guys, thanks for joining us today. Again, just to go by way of introduction, my name's Scott Shields, Solution Engineer with Delinea, and I'm joined today by Paul Previtt, consultant with IC Consult. Give us a hello there, Paul.
Hi, hello.
So thanks for joining for today's session. So we're going to run through, you know, as the introduction, what cybersecurity benefits or what requirements are related to cyber insurance industry with regards to the increasing prevalence of this, that we see through our customer base now, and that some of the requirements and key considerations to consider in relation to security with a focus on cyber insurance. So one of the key first sort of questions we ask this is why cyber insurance is why now? Why are we talking about this today? Why is it, you know, often a hot topic with customers and projects alike? And the reason is that this is a massive growth industry. So we can see, you know, just I guess a year and a bit ago, it was a $7.5 billion industry, rising to an estimated $14 billion in 2025. And this exactly mirrors the global growth of what we've seen in cyber attacks that have been prevalent over the last few years. The industry has grown to match the threat, vector from a variety of different underwriters and different companies that are now providing insurance, and it's definitely grown into the market and matured in many ways. There is another element to this that we often feel from, get field questions from our customers about why it's so expensive and, having to put controls in place to meet the requirements for cyber insurance now. And of course, it's related to all the standard reasons that anyone would have insurance to mitigate against this type of stuff: theft, fraud, forensic investigation. A lot of times organizations require teams to come in afterwards and part of a response cleanup or to do some investigative work as to ascertain the cause of any breach or threat that's been established. Business interruption, of course, you can't make money if a threat or breach has caused the the cessation of the business and it can't carry on. Extortion, reputational insurance, this is PR companies, this is reputation damage based on just information being out there. Organizations now have a mandate to declare this kind of stuff. No longer can you you sweep it under the carpet, so to speak. And this comes with a hefty reputational element to it as well, and often that can cause a lot of extra concern and money with regards to trying to clean up that. Data restoration, of course, as well, is typical database breach, that type of thing. And there's multiple types to consider here. So we tend to think about it, or security insurance underwriters tend to think of this as different buckets of coverage, and it's often much more extensive than customers initially give it credit for. So you think about how claims and how insurance is going to affect an organization in terms of, on the side 2 here, we see classic stuff like data breach and cyber event, an incident, ransomware, loss of funds, miscellaneous type of things. But this all just relates to how it affects the organization. The security function of an organization that's responsible for maintaining security around data, infrastructure, that type of thing. But in terms of insurance, it can often have a knock-on effect as well with third-party claims. This is things like, private rights of action, class action claims, customer lists being put in the open, and some of them taking legal action against an organization, media liability claims, regulatory claims and fines, that type of thing as well, that might have nothing to do with any individual or third-party suing an organization or anything like that. It could also just be that you're fined for not meeting some kind of regulatory compliance, and that is also, or can be, included in various cyber insurance policies that we see across our customer base.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
So what challenges do insurance companies face when underwriting cybersecurity policies?
So that's a good question. So there are multiple challenges in terms of, first and foremost, the type of insurance that they have. I mean, we're talking about cyber insurance in the general broad context, but also the type of cover that or the level of cover that that a customer or an organization wants to cover themselves for. And it really varies depending on an organization's threshold to risk and what industry they're in, and how many compliance and regulatory frameworks that they're a part of. But a lot of security underwriters and cyber insurance providers now are stipulating with increasing frequency certain security controls that are in place. Very similar to like with your car insurance, your house insurance, or any kind of personal level insurance. There's a degree of questions and information that have to be provided ahead of time to ensure a baseline level of accountability. It's becoming a little bit more difficult now for insurance providers to quantify that information from a security perspective, because the threat landscape is so vast. This is why we tend to purport from our side that identity protection, privilege protection is so important with regards to security, and that's now been recognized and reflected in cyber insurance underwriting providers requiring that as a core element of a prerequisite, if you like, to being able to even qualify for a cyber insurance application, let alone be covered in the first place. So yeah, it does vary a lot, but yeah, I hope that goes some way to answer that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, sure.
And so, we talk a bit about, how insurance can impact the business. A lot of this will be known. Of course, it's, as I said, it's a varying degree of risk acceptance, if you like. Of course, protection against financial loss is the main driver and motivation, but it can also include, again, cost for responding to incidents. You might recall, at least in the UK, like there was the TSB outage a while back that had they brought in an IBM team, to help them out. There was other incidents where you can bring in other teams for investigative, data forensics teams to identify what happened. A lot of incidents, the insurance provider can enforce certain elements of this on an organization as well, and that can cost them money ahead of making a claim, even in order to be covered for that type of thing. Compensation for damages, encouraging you to take proactive measures and to reduce the risk, and taking a more of a holistic risk response tool. So this is something that we've seen a lot of our customers talk about, the providers making sure that they have a response tool in place, not just from like a recovery and cleanup thing, but in order to more holistically address the response to new threats and new concerns as they appear on the landscape. How do organizations cover themselves from that as well? Because cyber insurance providers, much like standard security people, they understand the threat landscape changes, and they want to understand how their customers, who they're underwriting the protection for, how they're able to respond to new threats and new mitigations as well. So we take it that next sort of step down in order to ensure coverage of that. In fact, Paul, just to throw a quick question back at you. I mean, how we're talking about identity protection and privileged protection has been a core piece of this. How important do you see privileged access and identity tools as part of an organization's security overall?
Yeah. Well, as is often said, identity really is the new security perimeter. You can access corporate resources from anywhere, right? Using any kind of device or application.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to the identity of the human user or non-human users, such as code, machines, robots, scripts. Of course, you really need to establish who that to do. Which entitlements or permissions need to be granted, for example, to enable the permitted level of access, to a targeted resource. And once that access is granted, it doesn't just stop there. What does that entity, human user or non-human user, want to do or need to do, and for how long, and where are they looking to do it from? And using what device or application. So, in terms of privileged access, as you know, Scott, a number of years ago, at least in my memory, the compromise of privileged credentials was formed the root cause to a very high percentage of breaches, and I think that remains today. I saw numbers of up to 80 to 83% about a few years ago. I'm not aware of how that number pans out today, but it's still a very high percentage. And so, privileged accounts and secrets generally, they grant access to applications, to databases, to systems, to SaaS workloads. So they're very important, and they do it at the administrator developer level, which means that when falling into the wrong hands, this could lead to at best, as you mentioned in one of the slides earlier, major disruption, or at worst, through, for example, ransomware, to complete environment lockout.
Yeah, you're right. And with regards to like the percentage or of data breaches and where they come from, it does vary a lot depending on the particular, I guess, organization or body or vendor that you speak to. But you're right, privilege and identity, it's always within a very high, like with you 80 to 90% sort of threshold, and it does sort of drive home the importance of that, and also because it goes through the core of everything. I mean, there are many aspects of security that are important, network security, things that every part of it is important, but not every part touches every other part of the organization the same way identity does, particularly in a post-pandemic world.
Yes,
it's even more prevalent. So yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things, of course, the natural sort of follow for this is that what we're going to talk about is strategies to help reduce risk and premiums. And this isn't just, based on something that we purport from, privileged access or identity-driven projects and initiatives, but also what we've seen from feedback from our customers with regards to what is stipulated as part of, underwriting security cyber insurance policies. So first and foremost, sounds kind of obvious, but just implement robust security measures. And the big list of anyone who's ever filled out a questionnaire or applied for cyber insurance, and we've seen some of these. We work with some insurance providers to help, sort of stipulate the right controls in here is that certain security controls and measures are more prevalent than others. And actually, when somebody is going to give you money or underwrite the security risk of that, it really filters down to what is important. You know, you can sift out a lot of what is nice to have versus what is absolutely essential that you have. And of course, we would purport that the identity and privileged access driven piece of that is critically important. Regular review and update data protection policies, train employees in cybersecurity. A lot of these are also, come hand in hand with various security frameworks and compliance mandates. So, in the UK, it might be NIST or Cyber Essentials. In the States, it might be more, HIPAA related, that type of thing. But these are all, security controls and measures that underwriters will stipulate and enforce on an organization and want to see, evidence of before they then commit to an insurance contract that will be measured against the risk that they can determine. Conducting regular risk assessments and, of course, working with a trusted cyber insurance provider. There are many, and there's many more now than there have been before. The cyber insurance industry as a sub-industry from general insurance has proven to be quite profitable from an insurance perspective, and it's something that many more providers are now jumping on the bandwagon for, if you like, to offer that as a service. But it does come with its own risks, and that's why they are putting many more security measures in place that we can help provide for customers. On that point, Paul, just with regards to risk reduction and taking steps to meet these compliance, do you see, or how do these measures also help organizations comply with security regulations and best practices? I guess you've worked with customers before who need to are subject to various compliance and security mandates. I guess this all kind of fits into that facility as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, of course, particular verticals where regulatory compliance and pressures are very, very high. You can remember so critical national infrastructure or the oil and gas industry, energy, finance, pharmaceuticals, etc. And it's all down to that privileged access and identity security. They mandate that privileged access and identity security platforms are put in place, and they often reference when organizations are audited. On behalf of these regulators, they often reference, as you mentioned earlier, certain standards by organizations such as NIST and ISO 27001. And privileged access and identity platforms help with with security regulations in that respect. And you mentioned for the UK in particular, more recently, Cyber Essentials. That's another one that a lot of organizations have signed up to, even though it's currently, I don't think, mandated, but probably could become. And it does that, these platforms do it through providing key capabilities and features which deliver protection and visibility defined by both regulatory and best practice requirements and controls. So, like, for example, what a typical control would be like, ensure that audit records establish, the identity of individuals, or subjects or objects, entities, could be, non-human users associated with any activity or event. So who's doing it? Make sure that that's identified. What type of activity or event? When it occurred, where it occurred, the source of the activity or event, the outcome, etc. Another example is, particularly with IAM and IGA tools, which I work with a lot. Define system access authorization to support things like separation of duties. Which is very important, both for when you're talking business privileged users as well as technical privileged users. And of course, the integration between PAM platforms and IGA platforms using the SCIM protocol enables it. It takes us up to another level. But and then the other controls we can call out. Examples like define and document the types of accounts that are used, or allowed, private privileged accounts. We know that there are there are individual or sometimes called dedicated or personal privileged accounts, shared generic accounts, group accounts, system accounts like the built-in administrator or the Linux root guest accounts. In Azure, there's the guest account. That's an interesting one that a lot of organizations are trying to work out how to use that when providing external third-party access. They tend to just give the guest account to it, but it's a single identity, so it's kind of hard to get a bit more granular as to what's going on, and on and on. But basically, and of course, there are some of the more the classical ones, especially recently. Privileged access to an application or system should support the concept of least privilege and just-in-time access. So these are all the controls and best practices that the external auditors now look for. For example, from the Big Four or any auditor. And if you have those in place, which are all facilitated by PAM platforms and IJ tools, it basically helps you to pass your audit and avoid consequences of a failed audit, for example.
Yeah, and you basically hit in a great point there as well with regards to like the extent of privileged accounts. Like traditionally, it was, when I think, in this stuff for a few years now, it was really just it was like people, it was like the threat was a person who had excess privilege, and the concept of identity was still kind of coming around there, that it can be more than just a person can have an identity. It could be a service account, it could be an application account, it could be in an integration config file, it could be in code, anything that is ultimately going to be authenticating into something else is going to have to be secured. And human and machine identities can be vulnerable areas and are multiplying as more people migrate to cloud and look at consolidating that. So yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And so with regards to that, we have, I guess there's a few key common themes as well that we see. And now we are like, this is where where it can we see it from through a certain view or point of view, where customers who are seeking to either increase the benefits of their cyber and security contract by reducing premiums or meeting certain mandates come to us and stipulate these requirements. But we can see from feedback from customers that there are a few similarities, if you like, across various different cyber insurance underwriters, because not all customers would utilize the same one. So things like requiring effective security controls in place to minimize the risk of data breach. That one's obvious. That one's first and foremost. Privileged access being a critical part of the overall security policy and being written into underwriters' requirement for cyber insurance now. So I'm not aware of any, and there might be out there. We're not an insurance provider, but we're not aware of any that don't require a privileged access element to it. Much in the same way that a lot of security frameworks in general, like Cyber Essentials, like NIST compliance, like the ISO framework and things like that, all generally have a core thread of privileged access as part of it. Insurance isn't really that different than those compliance mandates. It's just now that they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is, and they're going to say, right, if we're going to write a contract that will pay out based on our assessment of your risk posture, we want you to have certain things in place, and privileged access is always core to that. Because the PAM controls reduce the risk to reducing the likelihood of a successful attack, thus leading to better policy terms and premiums. Now, because the industry is still in a maturing level, these policy terms seem to be as dynamic as the industry, and that might be a direct reflection of it. It might just be the threat landscape changes, things change so quickly or much more quickly in the cyber security landscape than they do in other areas of insurance, perhaps. But they are fluid in that sense, that customers will come to us and say, hey, if we can add a little bit more auditing around this, if we can add a little bit more security controls or segregation of duties or privileged access controls around this area of infrastructure, it will save us money, and then we'll ask why, and they'll say, well, this is what they've negotiated with their insurance underwriter. So it can lead to better terms or better premiums as far as we can determine through our customer base. And so then, we'll get to talking about, security risks and how ultimately they are increasing. Paul, I just wondered, you've worked with a lot of customers over the years as well. Can you think of any specific examples of a customer meeting either an insurance mandate or a security mandate where it's benefited them beyond just having that certificate, like as a checkbox, where they've actually protected them in the real world?
Yeah, sure. I've been a member of both IGA or IAM and PAM project implementation teams over the years, and a couple of examples of verticals that I can call out, industry verticals where organizations benefited immensely from implementing both IGA or IAM and PAM platforms are finance and pharmaceutical. There are many more, of course, such as defense, central government, public sector, legal, and others. They all require PAM. The two I can call out in particular from memory is finance and pharmaceutical. And aside from the cyber insurance question that we mentioned, in both cases, with all of these clients in those verticals that I've worked with, the only way they can actually pass their audits, so finance and pharmaceutical companies cannot pass their audits by external practitioners. So I'm not talking internal auditings, but by external practitioners such as the Deloitte or the KPMGs of this world, was to have both IGA or IAM and PAM platforms implemented, and to demonstrate the configuration and provide a lot of different statistics and reporting and audit data from those platforms in all cases. So it's for certain vertical sectors and industry sectors, it is simply mandatory. You simply can't do without that capability anymore. You simply won't pass your audits. Then, of course, there was the need in all of those clients that I worked with to tightly control and monitor both privileged business user and privileged technical user. Sometimes we forget about the privileged business user, like HR or someone like that, who's equally as an important stakeholder in the business as for example, a high-end AD administrator or full-blown Linux administrator, running a very large platform. But both business users and technical users, so being able to tightly control and monitor their access to critical applications and systems, client data. So with finance, it's very much about protecting your clients, your client data, of course. For the pharmaceuticals, it was heavily weighted on proprietary intellectual property information. They develop and design new drugs. That information gets into the wrong hands, it goes to a competitor, and they lose hundreds of billions of dollars of market share, whatever. But there was always a strong need to tightly control and monitor. So all privileged accounts of any kind or secrets had to be discovered and nailed down. They had to be vaulted, monitored when they're being used. When it came to critical applications or systems, recording had to be in place, and all those sort of typical PAM controls that we know of course. And then they also, aside from that, they gain from operational efficiencies. So what you find is that before you implement or roll out your use cases using PAM and IGA platforms or IAM platforms, you take a look at the existing workflows and processes, see how they can be improved, and then of course implement them as a configuration in the system, in the new system. And they all had huge gains there. And for example, onboarding new employees into their roles, and automatic lifecycle management, to provisioning and deprovisioning, the workflows around that, automated discovery, onboarding, and management of privileged accounts, and much else. It just up the game for them, and reduced the load on service desks and operational employees, made them a lot more productive. So that was a great win for them as well.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Paul. And you're hitting a couple of really interesting points there as well. One just earlier on about the business user piece and what is what qualifies as a privileged user. And it feels like almost every day I speak to organizations where we kind of change their perception of what is a privileged user. The people still focus on go straight to the domain administrators and the Linux administrators and things like that, but
Yes.
not realize the importance if somebody from the finance department, if that
Absolutely.
login to their accounting application became compromised, that in some ways could be just as critical than your Linux and domain administrators. So yeah, I guess affirming what actually qualifies as a privileged user, and in most organizations it's most people, like regardless of where they are, they're accessing internal resources, and yeah, it's understanding that threat vector as well. Okay, cool. So I guess we're talking about these risks and how they're increasing, and I guess we kind of touched on before about the post-pandemic element of that is now remote work is much more normal than before. Everyone's talking about how we might go back, or some kind of hybrid working is is going to be more normal going forward. But it's kind of happened now, and it's in the past, but it's definitely much more prevalent than it was. And from a security perspective, that created a lot of problems. So customers are dealing with exploding number of identities and human and machine endpoints, infrastructure, apps. No longer is everyone tied all neatly into like a nice, a nice office block somewhere, where you've got network security and been able to have a relatively predictable attack surface. Now the threat landscape is expanding to the such that with various endpoints, remote work styles, new application environments have grown in tandem, and as attackers innovate against these as well, ransomware spreads wider, and more automation scale attacks are reaching much more targets. So there's also, on the back of this, trying to fight back, the security vendors are proliferating in their offering as well. So being able to tie down and focus on the ones that are really important. I'm a strong advocate of layered security, but at the same time, not every layer was built even or equal, for lack of a better phrase. There are some things that that will be core to security that is always worth focusing on first. And so we tend to purport that now that everyone has an identity, and now we're in this sort of environment, that in the past identity was much more easy to track, and the relationships within them and self-contained networks was much easier to manage. But now, as we mentioned before, human and machine identities are multiplying. Now the reality of remote work and digital world, your attack surface is global, privileges are vary depending on the risk, and are increasingly hard to control. So one of the things that we can do is to help secure them, and compromised identities with risky privileges can bypass most security solutions and move laterally through the organization now. Even things like having too many local admin accounts on the endpoints, that type of thing. Passwords in clear text in a config file, something like that. Somebody wrote a PowerShell script to fix a problem once and just had a hard-coded credential in it. Things like that might not be considered as part of a core thing to take into consideration, is now not only being exploited by bad parties, but recognized as part of insurance underwriter policies as an area that has to be covered as well. So being able to, and not just control that, but demonstrate that you're controlling that as well. And PAM, traditionally covered some of these systems. So traditional PAM focuses on roles and sensitive infrastructure. So typically this was thought in terms of admins, as mentioned, being privileged users, domain admins, root Linux users, that type of thing, who had access to infrastructure, often limited to servers, or maybe located on premise, that type of thing. But now, as we just discussed, we're finding that actually to really reduce your surface area for attack, we have to expand this out to the entire enterprise. It could be DevOps, could be cloud, it could be finance, accounting packages, it could be sales and marketing information, anything that people has access to privileged infrastructure, machine accounts, service accounts, and their dependencies where they might be hiding, and scheduled tasks, scripts, app pools, that kind of stuff has to be consolidated and centralized into an extended tool to recognize that. And that's our approach for this. That's Delinea's vision for that extended PAM thing, where we want to be able to prevent identity and credential theft and stop people from getting through the front door, by pushing visibility and discovery of all identities and calling them out so that we can establish, security controls and privileged access around them. And then beyond this, following that on with data to look at, any superfluous or areas or where we want to enforce more least privilege methodology. People in general should have access within their job and work environment to things that are required to do their job, and for anything else, maybe there could be a workflow or an approval workflow, things like that in front of that. It's all about maintaining the productivity without affecting maintaining security without affecting productivity in that context, whether it's just elevating an application to run with admin rights without having to, make a help desk request and things like that. Much better for security and much better for the individual involved as well. One of the other areas we look at with part of this is what we call a PAM maturity model. Now, this actually aligns with what cyber insurance providers call their qualitative measure for identifying risk. So they have this thing where they have two measures of quantifying the risk. So it's quantitative and qualitative. Glad I got that right, because that's a bit of a tongue twister. Basically, one of them is to do with data science and refined mathematical algorithms and models. I'm not going to try and touch on that right now, but on the qualitative side, it's utilizing scales and partner and vendor information to be able to identify risks and threats and then scale them, whether that's 1 to 10 or high to low, whatever it may be. We use this maturity model in conjunction with various people to help quantify where new customers or existing customers sit on this model, and insurance providers can use this to quantify that data as well. So basically, starting off with organizations doing nothing to prevent them, bad things happening from a security perspective. Maybe credentials are still held in a spreadsheet, they're held in a less than enterprise grade, password manager, they're held in a browser, like in Chrome or Firefox or something, it just pre-populates the field. That kind of stuff that from an organizational privilege perspective is really not ideal. Right up into the more adaptive controls, where we're now hiding credentials from users who don't need to see them because we're facilitating secure remote access through a proper PAM tool. Integrated policies so that we can manage privilege across the estate, that type of thing, up to various levels of security as dependent on the organization. This maturity model aligns to various controls that we offer, and this also sort of aligns to the service that you guys through IC Consult can provide customers as well for more information and consultancy around that. So doing pretty good for time. Again, just final point from me, just from us at a glance. For those of you who might not be familiar with Delinea as a name, but you might be more familiar with the two companies that made us from a merger perspective. Delinea is this rebranded organization that came out of the merger between Psychotic and Centrify. Many of our customers are familiar with like Psychotic Secret Server, Privilege Manager, or maybe from the Centrify side for Cloud Suite and Server Suite and AD bridging technologies there as well. So we're bringing these together. We are a Gartner recognized leader in our field, and I won't banter too much on about the marketing stuff here, but this is who we are, and this is what we do. Paul, Manuela, is there any questions or anything like that coming through from anyone or from yourselves on anything we've discussed?
Yes. So
Cool.
I'm back. So if you have a question, type it in the chat. And the first question is, if PAM is a requirement of a cyber insurance policy, how do we prove or demonstrate that we have it, and are using it effectively?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Answer
And
that.
that comes from, I guess, like reporting and auditing control. So one of the nice things about PAM is that, or privileged access, identity-led security in general, is first and foremost, it is about security, but having more visibility and audit controls around that makes it very easy to report and alert on various things happening as well. So with regards to proving and demonstrating this, there's a variety of different reporting mechanisms that can be available to either a security administrator, a compliance finance reporting person who can pull out various information from, for example, Secret Server, the sort of principal vaulting piece of the tool set here, where they can align a report through maybe a custom report builder or a pre-built report. A lot of them are aligned with compliance mandates and security controls anyway, to generate the information required from a vendor. And quite often, the information is like, what accounts are running through the PAM tool. Are all privileged accounts meeting and congruent with your password compliance policy? They might just want to know that all your domain admin and local admin and privileged accounts are meeting a minimum criteria of complexity, like they're all 35 characters long, uppercase, lowercase, different character sets, things like that. In the context of something like, our tool set, that's just a report. So being able to demonstrate and report and make evidential, cases that that is being taken care of, it's usually just a report. And actually, we have customers utilizing the automatic report scheduler capability to do that, send that directly to their auditor. So even the process of, getting that information to them can largely be automated as well. So I would recommend a sort of combination of the reporting and alerting capabilities for that one as well.
All right, great, thanks. Another question that came in is, how long does a typical PAM project take?
So that's a question we get asked a lot, and basically it is very much dependent on the breadth and scope of a project. But basically, the good news from our perspective is that our time to value is in terms of other privileged access providers very, very short. So security controls should be easy and intuitive to use and to get on board with and to onboard users and accounts with. And where they're not, we see that as a security threat in itself, because if the security software is complicated in any way, it won't be adopted and it won't be used, and that's a risk in itself. So a PAM project is often a lot quicker than I think a lot of people give it credit for, because ultimately what we're doing is some kind of initial onboarding and discovery of privileged accounts, and much of it can be automated. There's automated discovery tools to scan Active Directory, for example. It will find all your domain accounts, local admin accounts, privileged accounts, and onboard them into the vault for you. And then you just delegate, who gets to, use them and report back on that through the auditing purpose as well. So we tend to take a phased approach, but to get to where customers need to for phase one, usually for a security compliance mandate or a cyber insurance contract, where they want to know and prove that all your privileged accounts are just encrypted in a vault with role-based access controls, that's very, very quick. Indeed, it's hours more than days, to get to a place like that, rather than being a protracted process as some people consider it to be. But yeah, so I hope that can go somewhere to answer that question.
Great, thank you. So we just have one more question where more information can be found. Maybe you can show your screen with the contact details, so you can contact us all the time.
That brings me nicely to the last one there, yeah.
So here are our contact details. You also have my contact email address. Feel free to contact me at any time. Any other upcoming questions, send an email to us and we will answer it right away. And yeah, if you don't have anything to add from your side, Paul and Scott,
Good.
then
I'm
great.
good. Just,
Then
you know,
I
thanks,
think,
Paul. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, likewise. Enjoyed it immensely.
yeah. Thank you,
Interesting.
and thank you all for your interest and your time. Many thanks to both of you for this great session, and I hope you also liked it. And yeah, if you have any further question, as just said, please don't hesitate to contact me. And yeah, you will all receive the recording of the webinar and also the slides, as also mentioned in the chat already, shortly. And yeah, then I wish you all a great rest of the day, and we hear us in some of the next webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.